All right, ready for another deep dive? You guys wanted to know more about pregnant cats and kittens, so that's what we're diving into today.
Should be interesting.
We've got some good research lined up for you today. There's a scientific review article about, what mama cats and their babies need, nutritionally, I mean.
Okay.
And then there's this other article about like how vets manage, pregnancies in cats.
All right.
I'm joined by our feline expert as always, ready to unpack all this stuff.
Let's go.
Let's jump right in. This was a fascinating fact. Cat ovulation, did you know it's caused by mating?
Yeah, that's right. It's a reflex, a neuroendocrine reflex triggered by the spines on the male cats. Well.
Oh, wow. So it's not just a romantic evening, it's like a biological necessity.
Exactly.
Okay, so gestation. We all know it's like 2 months, right?
Mm.
Roughly.
Yeah, give or take.
But the articles mention that that it can vary a bit.
Oh, yeah, for sure. The average is like 65 days, but it
Mhm.
can be anywhere from 52 to 74.
Wow, that's a big range.
Yeah, and the shorter ones, anything less than 60 days, that's risky, for the kittens.
Yeah, that makes sense. They're not fully developed, probably. The articles even say that different breeds have different gestation lengths. Like Siamese cats have shorter pregnancies than Persians.
Interesting.
Do you think like breeders really pay attention to that kind of stuff?
I'm sure they do. It's all part of, planning a breeding program. Got to understand those little differences.
Okay, so let's talk about the queen, the mama cat. What does she need to eat when she's pregnant? I mean, we all know she gains weight, like just like us humans.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
But the articles really stress the quality of the food, right?
Oh, absolutely. 2 weeks before breeding, even you got to start switching her over to a really good
Oh,
diet.
really? 2 weeks before?
Yeah, high quality, easy to digest. Get her body ready for the changes.
So it's like prepping her, setting
Right.
her up for success.
Exactly.
And then as she gets further along, she needs even more food, right?
Yep, her energy needs they go up gradually. By the 9th week, they're like 25 to 50% higher than normal.
Wow, that's a lot. It's like she's eating for a whole litter of kittens, huh? I've heard people say that you got to give pregnant cats extra calcium and vitamin D.
Hmm.
But these articles say you don't need that if she's eating a good diet already.
Right. If her food is already balanced, formulated right, then all that extra stuff can actually be bad for her.
Really?
Yeah, it can cause problems
Mhm.
like calcification, or it can mess with the kitten's development.
Huh. That's interesting. More isn't always better, I guess. Any practical tips like for actually feeding her?
Well, during that last part of the pregnancy, the last trimester,
Right.
it's better to give her lots of smaller meals instead of a couple of big ones
Ah, okay.
because the kittens are taking up so much space. Her stomach can't expand as much.
Makes sense. Easier to digest that way. One thing the sources mentioned was DHA. It's really important for the kitten's brains, right?
Absolutely, it's an omega-3 fatty acid,
Okay.
and it plays a huge role in how the kitten's brains and eyes develop. Best way to make sure they get enough is through, their mother's diet.
So it's all about giving mama the right stuff, and then she passes it on.
Exactly.
The articles also mentioned protein needs. They really shoot up during pregnancy and then again during lactation.
Yeah, it's a big jump.
How much protein do they actually need?
Well, during pregnancy, they need about 200 grams per kilogram of food. And then during lactation, it goes up even more,
Oh, wow.
like 250 to 300 grams per kilogram.
So to sum it all up for our listeners, when it comes to feeding a pregnant cat, the key is good food
Yeah.
and gradually increasing the amount, right?
Right,
No need for extra calcium or vitamin D, if she's eating a balanced diet already.
right.
And then in those last few weeks, smaller meals more often. And make sure it's packed with protein and DHA.
You got it.
Okay, now let's jump ahead. Those first few weeks after the kittens are born, that's a critical time, right, for their survival.
Oh, yeah?
The articles mention that up to 30% of kittens can die before they're weaned. That's kind of scary.
It is. It really shows how important those first few weeks are. Nutrition is key.
So, what's the most important thing we can do to help them survive and thrive?
Colostrum, that first milk the mother produces.
Yeah, I heard of that.
It's packed with antibodies and all sorts of good stuff.
So, how fast do they need to get it? I mean, is there like a time limit?
Oh, yeah. They only have about 3 to 6 hours to absorb those antibodies.
Wow, that's a tiny window.
Those first few feedings are crucial.
So, colostrum is like like a superfood for kittens,
Yeah, you could say that.
and then it changes to regular milk, right? What's the difference?
Well, colostrum actually has less protein and fat than regular milk,
Oh, really?
but way more iron. It's all about, giving them exactly what they need at each stage.
So it's perfectly designed for those first few hours of life. What if the mother can't nurse? I
Hmm.
mean, what are the alternatives?
Well, you got to step in and provide something else. Cow's milk isn't good. It
Oh,
can cause tummy troubles.
really? I always thought cow's milk would be fine.
Yep.
Okay, so what are the better options?
There are milk replacers made just for kittens. They try to copy the mother's milk as closely as possible.
Okay.
And if you can't find those, there are homemade recipes.
Oh, interesting.
But you got to be careful with those. Make sure you get the nutrients right.
Right, that makes sense. Any tips on how to actually feed them? Like with a bottle or a syringe?
A bottle that feels like the mother's nipple is good. Helps stimulate their sucking reflex.
Ah, okay.
And if you're using a syringe, go slow. You don't want them to choke.
Yeah, of course. And you'd have to help them go to the bathroom too, right?
Yeah, just like babies. A little massage on their tummy after each feeding helps.
It's like you're basically a surrogate mother cat.
That's right.
Okay, we've talked about feeding, but what about their tiny tummies?
Ah, you're talking about gut health. The intestinal microbiota.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a fascinating world.
Yeah.
Really important for their development.
So how does that develop in kittens?
Well, when they're born, their gut is basically sterile,
Okay.
completely blank slate.
Uh,
But then within hours, it starts getting colonized.
Nice.
Yeah, all sorts of microorganisms move in. Bacteria, fungi, even some viruses.
Wow.
It's like setting up an ecosystem in their gut.
So there are good bacteria and bad bacteria, right?
Exactly.
And we want to encourage the good ones. What role do prebiotics and probiotics play?
Okay, think of prebiotics like fertilizer for the good bacteria. They're types of fiber like inulin, FOS, and they help those beneficial bacteria grow, boost the immune system, improve digestion, all that good stuff.
So prebiotics are like giving the good bacteria a boost,
Yeah, something like that.
and probiotics.
Those are the actual live bacteria, the good guys that we add to the gut.
I see. So prebiotics feed the good guys, and probiotics add more good guys.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Especially helpful after, something like diarrhea or if they've had antibiotics.
Makes sense.
There's one probiotic, Enterococcus faecium.
Okay.
It's really good at repopulating the gut with those good bacteria.
So are there benefits beyond just digestion?
Oh, for sure. There's actually research showing that probiotics can help with herpes virus symptoms.
Really?
Yeah, during times of stress, probiotics can reduce how bad the symptoms are.
That's amazing. So a healthy gut is like important for their whole body.
It seems that way.
Okay, let's talk about energy. Kittens, they're like little bundles of energy, always on the move.
They are.
How much energy do they need?
Oh, it's incredible. During growth, they need like 3 or 4 times more energy than adult cats.
Wow. Do their needs stay that high the whole time they're kittens?
No, it gradually decreases as they get closer to their adult weight. By like 7 or 8 months old, their needs are only about 1.25 to 1.5 times higher than an adult.
Okay, so it goes down over time. But how do you figure out exactly how much they need at each stage? Is there some kind of formula?
There's something called the factorial method. It sounds complicated, but it's not too bad. You take the kitten's weight in kilograms, multiply it by 100, and then you adjust that number based on their age and how active they are.
Okay, and what about commercial kitten food? How can we know if it has enough energy?
Look for the AAFCO statement on the bag or can.
AAFCO.
The Association of American Feed Control Officials. They set standards for pet food.
Gotcha.
So if a food says it's complete and balanced for kittens, it means it meets those standards.
That's good to know. Okay, so we've covered a lot about kitten nutrition, but not every pregnancy goes smoothly, right?
Unfortunately, no.
So what are some of the things that can go wrong? Let's start with eclampsia.
Okay. Eclampsia. It's also called hypocalcemia. Basically, the calcium levels in the blood get too low.
And that can happen during pregnancy?
Yeah, sometimes even before labor.
Wow. What causes that?
We don't know for sure, but it seems to be related to the increased need for calcium during pregnancy, especially if she's having a big litter.
So are there any signs to look out for?
It can be tricky because the symptoms are kind of general.
Mm.
Lethargy, loss of appetite, muscle tremors, even seizures.
So if you notice anything unusual, it's best to get her checked by a vet, right?
Absolutely. Better safe than sorry.
Now, what about ectopic pregnancy? I've heard of that in humans, but can it happen in cats?
Yeah, it's rare, but it can happen. It's when the fertilized egg implants outside the uterus.
And what happens then?
Well, the kittens usually aren't viable. They don't survive.
Oh, that's sad.
Yeah, and the mother cat can get really sick.
Are there any signs of that?
Some general signs like vomiting, loss of appetite, maybe blood in the urine. But it can be tough to diagnose without, an ultrasound or something.
So, again, any strange symptoms, go to the vet.
Yeah.
Okay, what about uterine torsion? That sounds scary.
It is. It's when the uterus twists on itself.
And that's bad because...
It cuts off the blood supply to the kittens.
Oh, wow.
It's an emergency situation.
When does that usually happen?
Usually later in the pregnancy.
Okay.
And it's thought to be caused by, movement of the kittens or maybe the queen making a sudden movement.
So what are the signs?
You might see bloody discharge, abdominal pain. She might be really uncomfortable.
So again, emergency vet visit.
Definitely.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit and talk about pregnancy loss.
Okay.
It's something that unfortunately happens sometimes. We've talked about infections,
Right.
but there are other causes too, right?
Definitely.
Like what?
Well, there's something called hypoluteoidism.
Hypo what?
Hypoluteoidism, it's a mouthful.
Yeah, it is.
Basically, it's when the corpora lutea, these structures on the ovaries, they stop working too early.
And why is that bad?
They produce progesterone, which is essential for maintaining the pregnancy. So if they stop working, the progesterone levels drop.
And the pregnancy ends.
Exactly.
So it's like a hormonal issue.
Yeah, but we don't really know what causes it. It's kind of a mystery.
Huh. Interesting. Are there any other causes?
Sometimes it's chromosomal errors, like glitches in the genetic code of the kittens.
Oh, wow.
And that can lead to, all sorts of problems. Often the pregnancy ends early.
So sometimes it's just like a genetic incompatibility?
You could say that.
Okay, and what about diet? Can that play a role in pregnancy loss?
Definitely. A poor diet can make a cat more susceptible to all sorts of problems, including pregnancy complications.
So it's not just about making sure she gets enough food, but also the right kinds of food?
Exactly. There are certain nutrients that are especially important during pregnancy.
Like what?
Taurine, for example. It's an amino acid that's essential for cats.
Okay.
They can't make it on their own, so they have to get it from their diet.
And if they don't get enough?
It can cause all sorts of reproductive issues. Miscarriage, stillbirth, even developmental problems in the kittens.
So it's really important to make sure they're getting enough taurine.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And most good quality cat foods are supplemented with taurine, especially those designed for, pregnancy and lactation.
So that's something to look for on the label.
Yeah, definitely.
And I guess sometimes, even with the best care, things just happen, right?
Unfortunately, yes.
Mm.
Sometimes we never know why a pregnancy is lost.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, from the beginning of pregnancy all the way to, well, the possibility of it ending too soon. It's a lot to take in.
It is.
But before we get too deep into the emotional side of things, let's take a break and come back for part 2. We'll dive into some more fascinating aspects of kitten development, and we'll explore whether probiotics could be the key to, like, a whole new level of feline health. Stay tuned.
Sounds good. Welcome back. Ready to dive back in?
Absolutely. I feel like I'm learning so much about all the things that go into bringing these little kittens into the world.
It's fascinating stuff.
It is. We were talking about diet and all that, but I was wondering about the queen's behavior. Like, does her behavior change when she's pregnant?
That's a good question. There isn't as much research on that as there is on, the physical side of things.
Yeah.
But we can kind of look at other animals, like humans, for clues. Hormones definitely played a role.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think it's safe to say that pregnant cats probably go through some changes, too.
Oh, those pregnancy hormones. So what kind of changes might we see?
Well, some cats might get extra cuddly, wanting more attention.
Right.
Others might become more withdrawn or even grumpy.
Makes sense. I mean, their bodies are going through a lot.
Exactly. It's different for every cat, just like it's different for every human.
Right, right. Okay, before we get too sidetracked by feline emotions, let's go back to those first few weeks of a kitten's life. We talked about colostrum, that super important first milk.
Yeah.
But once they've had enough of that, what are some of the other big milestones, like, in their development?
Well, one of the most exciting ones is when they open their eyes.
Oh, yeah.
That usually happens between 7 and 10 days old.
So tiny.
Yeah, it's gradual at first. Their vision is kind of blurry. But after a few weeks, they can see pretty well.
I can just imagine them looking around, taking it all in. What about their hearing? When do they start, using their ears?
Their ear canals open around the same time as their eyes, but their hearing takes a little longer to fully develop.
Okay.
They jump at loud noises. And it takes a while for them to figure out where sounds are coming from.
Ah, so it's all a process. What about moving around? When do they start walking?
They usually start crawling around 10 to 14 days old.
Oh, wow, that early.
Yeah, it's pretty wobbly at first, but they get the hang of it quickly.
Yeah.
By 3 weeks old, they're running around exploring.
I bet that's fun to watch.
It is.
We talked about how much energy kittens need. They're like little eating machines.
They are.
But how do you know if they're getting enough? What are some signs to look out for?
Well, first of all, you want to make sure they're gaining weight. If they're not, or if they seem really tired, or if they're crying a lot, it could mean they're not getting enough to eat.
So you got to weigh them regularly.
Yeah, definitely. And if you're worried, talk to your vet.
Okay, back to gut health for a minute. You mentioned that probiotics might help with some viral infections.
Yeah,
Is that like a new area of research?
it is. The gut microbiome is, it's incredibly complex. We're just starting to understand how it affects health.
It's like a whole world inside their bodies.
It is.
Yeah.
And probiotics, they might be able to help with all sorts of things.
Really? Like what?
Well, for one thing, allergies. We know allergies are common in cats, and there's some evidence that probiotics might help reduce the allergic reactions.
Wow. So probiotics could be like a natural allergy medicine?
Maybe. It's still early, but the research is promising.
That's exciting. What about other things?
Oh, well, there's inflammatory bowel disease, or IBD. It's a chronic condition, causes inflammation in the gut. Probiotics might be able to help with that too,
Okay, how?
by restoring the balance of bacteria in the gut.
Ah, I see.
And there's even research looking at whether probiotics can help with stress and anxiety in cats.
Really? Wow. Anything else?
Some researchers are even looking at cognitive function,
Hmm.
how the brain works,
Mm,
especially in older cats.
that's amazing. It seems like probiotics could be like a game changer for feline health.
It's possible.
Okay, let's switch gears for a minute and talk about breeders. The people who are dedicated to raising healthy kittens. We've talked about all these challenges they face, like pregnancy loss and all those complications.
Right.
So, what are some things breeders can do to minimize those risks?
Well, knowledge is key. The more they know, the better they can care for their cats.
So, it's about staying informed. What are some specific things they can do?
Well, one thing is careful selection of the breeding cats. There are genetic tests now that can screen for, hereditary diseases.
Oh, wow.
So breeders can use that information to make sure they're not passing on any bad genes.
It's like looking into the future of a cat's health.
Yeah.
What about before they breed? Any important steps there?
Absolutely. Pre-breeding health screenings are essential.
Okay, what does that involve?
A full physical exam, blood work to check for any underlying problems, and of course, vaccinations.
So you want to start with a clean slate, so to speak,
Exactly.
and during the pregnancy.
Well, nutrition is crucial, like we talked about, and regular vet checkups throughout the pregnancy.
So it's like prenatal care for cats.
You could say that.
And, of course, good hygiene. We've talked about that a lot.
Absolutely. Keeping everything clean is essential to prevent infections.
So it's about creating a healthy and safe environment for the mom and her kittens. But what about, the bigger picture? How can we as a society help cats? I mean, not just our pets, but all cats.
That's a great point. One thing is supporting organizations that work to protect wild cats.
Oh, yeah.
They do amazing work, preserving habitats, studying these animals. And what we learn about wild cats can actually help us understand our domestic cats better, too.
So it's all connected.
It is. And another thing is supporting responsible breeders,
Yeah.
like choosing to adopt from a shelter, or if you do buy from a breeder, make sure they're ethical,
Yeah.
that they're not just in it for the money.
So do your research before you buy a kitten. What about spay and neuter programs?
Those are huge.
Hmm.
They help reduce the number of unwanted cats and kittens, which takes the pressure off shelters, and it also helps control feral cat populations.
Right, because feral cats can be a problem for wildlife.
Exactly.
Okay, so spay and neuter is like a win-win. Any other things we can do?
Learn as much as you can about cats.
Oh, yeah.
The more you know about their health, their behavior, the better you can advocate for them.
So knowledge is power.
It is.
Okay, before we move on to the last part of our deep dive, I want to go back to something you said about probiotics, how they could be a game changer for feline health.
Right.
Do you think they could, like, revolutionize how we care for cats? I mean, the way they're already changing human healthcare.
That's a really interesting thought. It's definitely possible. I mean, as we learn more about the gut microbiome, we're finding out just how important it is.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe one day we'll be using probiotics to prevent and treat all sorts of health problems in cats.
That's exciting. Instead of just treating the symptoms, we could be, like, addressing the root cause.
Exactly.
That's amazing. Okay, let's take a break and come back for part 3. We'll talk more about those pregnancy abnormalities, and we'll explore whether we might one day be able to, predict and even prevent pregnancy loss in cats. Stay tuned. And we're back for the final part of our deep dive into the world of feline pregnancy and kitten care. I'm still reeling from all the amazing things we've talked about.
It's been quite a journey.
It has, from the miracle of conception all the way to the potential challenges.
Yeah.
So let's go back to those abnormalities we discussed earlier. Eclampsia, that one that can happen even before labor.
Right.
What was that called again? Hypo something?
Hypocalcemia.
Hypocalcemia, yeah. That one's tricky, right? Because it can be, like, hidden.
It can. A queen can seem perfectly fine, and then bam, suddenly she's really sick.
So what are some things to watch for, even if she seems, normal?
Well, her appetite. If she's not eating as much
Yeah.
or not at all, that's a big warning sign.
Okay.
Lethargy, too. If she's usually playful and active, but suddenly she's just sleeping all the time.
So basically, any big change in her behavior.
Yeah, anything out of the ordinary.
Are there any physical signs besides just acting different?
You might see muscle tremors, like her muscles twitching,
Okay.
or she might be wobbly when she walks. In really bad cases, she might even have seizures.
Wow, that's scary. It really shows you how delicate, pregnancy can be, even in cats.
Definitely.
Okay, what about ectopic pregnancy? That's when the egg implants in the wrong place, right?
Right, outside the uterus.
How does that even happen?
We don't really know for sure. It could be inflammation or maybe some scarring in the reproductive tract.
Oh, okay.
Something that prevents the fertilized egg from, traveling to the right place.
And those pregnancies, they usually don't end well, do they?
Sadly, no.
That's heartbreaking. Okay, and then there's uterine torsion, the twisting.
Yeah.
It's hard to imagine that actually happening.
It is. Basically, the uterus can twist, rotate too much.
And that blocks the blood flow to the kittens, right?
Exactly.
We talked about some symptoms like bloody discharge, but are there any other signs?
She might strain to urinate or defecate.
Oh, okay. Why is that?
The twisted uterus puts pressure on her bladder and intestines. And you might notice that her belly looks, bigger or kind of misshapen.
So any change in her bathroom habits or how her belly looks?
Definitely red flags.
Red flags. Okay, so all of those are pretty serious. And it sounds like, the sooner you get to the vet, the better.
Absolutely. Time is crucial.
Okay, let's talk about pregnancy loss. We know it happens.
Yeah.
But is there any way to, like, predict it? Are there any signs that a pregnancy might be in trouble?
It's tough to say for sure. I mean, there are things that can increase the risk, but it's not always clear cut.
So it's a lot of waiting and hoping for the best.
It is. But we can do things to minimize the risks.
We've talked about hygiene and good food and vet checkups. Anything else?
Stress management. That's a big one.
Interesting. For the queen, you mean?
Yeah. Keeping her calm and comfortable.
Yeah.
Not changing her routine too much. Lots of love and affection.
So it's about her mental health, too, not just her physical health.
Exactly.
Wow, we've covered a lot of ground, from those first tiny cells to healthy, playful kittens.
We have.
It's amazing all the things that have to go right to bring those little lives into the world.
It is amazing.
I feel like I've learned so much. Any final thoughts for our listeners?
Keep learning.
Yeah.
The more you know about cats, the better you can care for them.
I totally agree. A huge thank you to our feline expert for all this amazing information.
My pleasure.
And to our listeners, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you've enjoyed it. Keep those tails wagging and those whiskers twitching. We'll see you next